Imagine you run a hospital. The land belongs to your organization. The building was constructed partly using donations from abroad. Now for 20 years, you have been running that hospital. Now imagine that your organization's FCRA registration is cancelled or simply expired or isn't renewed. What happens to that building? Can the government take control of it? Can it eventually transfer it to another government agency? Or should the organization that created it continue to own it? This may sound hypothetical, but this is at the heart of one of India's biggest debates over civil society, foreign funding and national security, and it is the Foreign Contribution Regulation Amendment Bill 2026. It proposes a new mechanism under which foreign contributions and assets created from them can, in certain circumstances, vest in a government-designated authority. The opposition says that this gives the government excessive powers over NGOs, religious institutions, and civil societies. Now, the government says the law is necessary to prevent foreign money from being misused and to ensure that assets created from foreign contributions do not disappear into a legal grey zone. And now, in August 2026, the controversy has reached the Parliament. The Lok Sabha has referred the bill to a 31-membered Joint Parliamentary Committee, JPC, while opposition parties had demanded that the government withdraw it altogether. So let's start with the very basics. What is FCRA? Why was it created? Why has it been amended repeatedly? And most importantly, is FCRA a national security law, a financial regulation law, or a tool that can potentially restrict civil society? Let us go back to the beginning to know the answers. So answering question number 1, why does India need an FCRA? Let's start with a simple question. Why should the government regulate a foreign donation to an Indian NGO? After all, if someone in the US, Britain or Japan wants to donate 100 crores or 10 crores to an Indian hospital, what's wrong with that? Nothing, in principle. See, India does not prohibit foreign contributions altogether. Instead, it regulates who can receive them and how they can be received and how they can be used. The logic is very straightforward. Foreign money can fund genuinely valuable activities. It can fund schools, it can fund hospitals, disaster relief, scientific research, poverty reduction, religious and charitable activities, and so on. But money can also potentially be used to influence political processes, fund activities detrimental to national interest, or bypass India's domestic regulatory framework. And that creates a sovereign state dilemma. See, how do you allow legitimate international philanthropy without allowing foreign money to become a channel for a foreign influence? This is the fundamental question behind FCRA. So let's talk about the origin first. 1976. India's first dedicated FCRA was enacted in 1976 during the emergency. The Foreign Contribution Regulation Act of 1976 created restrictions on receiving foreign contributions and foreign hospitality. The historical context is very important. The government was concerned that the foreign funds could influence political institutions and public life in India. The basic philosophy was therefore, foreign money should not be allowed to compromise India's political independence or national interests. But the 1976 law had one major difference from today's system. Registration was not based on the 5-year renewable framework we have today. That changed with the new next major milestone, which is the big reset in 2010. Now let's talk about the year 2010, which is the big reset. Now yes, in 2010, Parliament repealed the 1976 law and enacted the Foreign Contribution Regulation Act of 2010. It came into force on 1st of May 2011. Now the new law attempted to modernize the framework. It defined foreign contributions and foreign sources more clearly. It created a registration system, and importantly, FCRA registration became time-bound. An organization generally needs registration or prior permission to receive foreign contribution, and the registration is valid for 5 years before renewal. See, the Act also created rules relating to bank accounts, annual returns, audits, inspection, suspension, cancellation, and utilization of foreign contributions. So FCRA was no longer simply foreign money is suspicious. Now let's talk about the political party question, because it's very fascinating. FCRA also regulates foreign contributions to political parties. Political parties are prohibited from accepting foreign contributions under this particular framework. But in 2016, Parliament changed the definition of what constitutes a foreign source in relation to companies, and the change was made retrospectively. See, then in 2018, Parliament further amended the framework to make the definition consistent with the FDIF regime and gave the amendment effect from 5th of August 1976 and the commencement date of the original FCRA. The government's stated rationale was to align FCRA with the Foreign Investment Framework and Companies Act provisions. This episode illustrates something important. FCRA has never been merely an NGO law. It sits at the intersection of foreign influence, political finance, corporate ownership, national security and civil society. And then came the most consequential modern amendment, the FCRA Amendment Act of 2020. It made several major changes. The first one, transfer of foreign contribution. The law prohibited an organization receiving foreign contribution from transferring to another person or organization. This was a major change because NGOs often operate through networks of partner organizations. That was the first change. Second change was administrative expenses. The permitted limit was reduced from 50% to 20% of foreign contributions. The argument was, if rupees 100 comes from abroad for charitable work, a much larger proportion should actually reach the intended program rather than administrative expenditure. And now coming to the third point, which is FCRA bank account. FCRA contribution had to first enter a designated FCRA account at the SBI New Delhi main branch, after which funds could be transferred to your utilization account. The fourth point is identification. The fourth change is identification. Aadhaar was introduced as an identification requirement for office bearers and key functionaries, subject to statutory framework. Now, the government argued that these measures, four measures, would improve transparency and prevent diversion. Critics, however, argued that these restrictions would disproportionately burden NGOs even more, and which is why they definitely opposed it. And not just this, they said that organizations that rely on partnership would also be negatively impacted. And now it's the time of Supreme Court to enter, which is the story of 2022. The Supreme Court considered challenges to several provisions of the 2020 amendments in a Neil Harper versus Union of India. Now, the court upheld the challenged provisions. Its reasoning was very, very important. The court held in substance that foreign contribution is not a fundamental right. Parliament can therefore impose regulatory conditions on receiving foreign funds, particularly where the objective is to protect sovereignty, integrity, public order, and national interests. But this doesn't mean, the government can do whatever it wants. It means that the foreign funding is a regulated activity and the restriction must still operate within the constitutional framework. This distinction becomes crucial when we examine the 2026. So let's understand the scale. According to the MHA data, FCRA associations received around 16,941 crore in 2017-18, 16,526 crore in 2018-19, and 15,854 crore in 2019-20. More recently, the scale has grown again. PRS, using the FCRA portal and the government data, reports that 13,520 organizations received 55,000 plus crore between 2019 and 2022. As of 15 July 2026, the FCRA portal showed approximately 14,449 active FCRA certificates, 22,498 cancelled certificates, and 15,212 certificates deemed expired. Now, these numbers need an important caveat. A cancelled or expired certificate does not automatically mean that an organization committed fraud or a crime. Registrations can cease for different reasons, including failure to renew. So we should never equate FCRA registration lost is equal to NGO guilty. That would be factually very, very wrong. So now the question is, what actually is the 2026 bill? And now we reach today's controversy. See, the FCRA Amendment Bill of 2026 was introduced in Lok Sabha on 25th of March 2026. Its central innovation is the creation of a designated authority. And this is where things become interesting. Under the proposed system, if an organization's FCRA certificate is cancelled, surrendered, or ceases because renewal wasn't obtained, foreign contributions and assets created from foreign contribution can provisionally vest in the designated authority. The authority can supervise and maintain those assets. And if the organization later restores or renews its registration under the prescribed mechanism, the asset and the unused contribution can be returned. But if the registration isn't restored within the prescribed period, the vesting can become permanent. The asset can then be used for public purposes, transferred to the government agencies, or disposed off. Sale proceeds and unutilized foreign contribution would go to the Consolidated Fund of India, and that is a major change in the legal architecture. The question is, why is it so controversial? See, imagine an organization having a building worth 20 crores. Over the years, perhaps 5 crore came from foreign contribution and remaining 15 from the domestic sources. The bill also covers assets created partly from foreign contributions. This is where critics see a serious problem. Who determines the foreign funded share? Who manages the assets? How quickly can organization challenge the decision? And what happens to the domestic contribution embedded in the asset? PRS has specifically flagged the implications of asset vesting and noted that the current framework does not provide an appeal mechanism against denial of FCRA renewal itself. These are precisely the kinds of questions that a parliamentary committee can examine. The government position is also very important. Suppose a foreign organization receives some money and constructs a hospital. Then its FCRA registration is cancelled, so who should control that hospital? If the organization disappears, becomes defunct or permanently loses its registration, the government argues that simply allowing foreign funded assets to remain in legal limbo is not practical. The proposed designated authority therefore creates a mechanism for custody, management, continuity and ultimate public use. The government also argues that the bill does not prohibit illegitimate foreign funding, and there is one important provision regarding places of worship. If an asset permanently vested under the bill is a place of worship, the designated authority must ensure that its religious character is maintained. The bill also reduces the maximum imprisonment for FCRA violation from 5 years to 1 year, and it requires prior approval of the central government before an investigation for an offence under the Act can be initiated. So the bill is not simply a story of more punishment. In some areas, it actually reduces criminal penalties while increasing administrative controls over assets, which is why, since there is opposition to the bill, but there are positive sides to the bill as well. So answering the bigger question, how should India regulate foreign influence? And this is where the FCRA debate becomes much bigger than NGO. India is not the only democracy concerned about foreign influence. Countries across the world regulate foreign funding, they regulate political lobbying and foreign agent relationship. The underlying principle is legitimate. A democracy country should know when foreign money is entering sensitive areas of public life and how that money is being used. But there is a second principle that is equally important: regulation. Regulation should not become a substitute for political control. And this is where the quality of institutions matter. The ideal FCRA framework should achieve 4 things simultaneously. 1. National security. Prevent foreign money from financing activities generally detrimental to India's sovereignty and security. 2. Transparency. Every rupee entering through the foreign contribution channel should be traceable. 3. Accountability. Organizations that misuse funds should face meaningful consequences. And 4th, civil society freedom. Legitimate organizations should not be paralyzed simply because their work is inconvenient or critical of the government. That balance is difficult, but this is precisely what parliamentary scrutiny matters. Now, since the bill is sent to the JPC, it is for us to see that what will happen of the bill. Certain amendments definitely will be made, and the JPC can examine a lot of questions, that what has triggered permanent vesting or what has been denied in this. Should there be judicial oversight? What will happen when assets created decades ago under FCRA regime, what will happen to them? See, the FCRA debate ultimately comes down to one uncomfortable truth. Foreign money is neither automatically good nor automatically bad. A foreign donation can build a hospital, it can educate a child, it can fund disaster relief, it can support scientific research. But foreign money can also create channels of influence that a sovereign country may legitimately want to regulate. Therefore, India's challenge is not to choose between national security and civil society. The challenge is to design institutions that protect both. The FCRA has traveled a long way since 1976, from a law born in the shadow of emergency to the modern FCRA of 2010, to the major restrictions introduced in 2020, and now to the proposed 2026 framework centered around foreign funded assets. And perhaps the most important question is not should India regulate foreign funding? Of course it should. The real question is how much power should the government have while doing it, and what safeguards should exist? Because in a democracy, national security matters, but so does the independence of civil society. And the strongest FCRA framework will not be the one that gives the government the most power. It will be the one that gives the government enough power to protect India's national interest, while giving citizens enough safeguard to protect their freedom. And now, with the bill before the Joint Parliamentary Committee, India has an opportunity to get that balance right. Thank you and have a great day.